Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where Dan Maisey and Rory Stewart Richardson dive into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. We're absolutely thrilled to welcome Matt Rogan to our podcast, an absolute beacon of innovation and leadership in the sports and entertainment sectors. Matt's journey from the co-founder and CEO of Two Circles, a groundbreaking sports marketing agency founded in 2011 that transformed from a kitchen table idea to a market leader and was acquired by WPP within just 3.5 years, to his role as a chairman, author and mentor, encapsulates the essence of turning vision into success. His expertise in leveraging big data, digital disruption and building businesses that resonate with tomorrow's customers has not only shaped the sports marketing landscape, but also offers invaluable insights into talent, recruitment and management. Matt's candid approach, sharing both triumphs and setbacks, combined with his ability to engage and inspire through storytelling, makes him a fascinating guest. His experiences from starting out a management consultancy to navigating the growth of a business at an unprecedented pace to mentoring CEOs and becoming a best-selling author will give us huge insight into the different approaches to hiring that he's experienced and the lessons that he's taken from it all. Matt, welcome to Talent Talks. How are you?
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. I'm not sure I've been called a beacon before, is it?
Yeah, I'm going for it. Yeah, I think that's the thesaurus.com coming out there.
There we go. I'll take it, I think.
Great. So, look, there's a lot we want to unpack and get through in the 25, 30 minutes today. But as always, we start with the same question. What are your experiences of hiring and being hired? And do you have any lessons learned?
I guess maybe if I take those the other way around, so experiences of being hired probably started as a slightly frustrated management consultant working in the city, feeling like I was learning a lot about business, but not really doing anything that was intrinsically motivated to me, and then had to find a way in a very different sports industry of navigating my way in without a dad who worked in the industry or an uncle who happened to run a business and any of the way that it used to work. So I guess experiences of being hired and what I learned along that way probably was about picking the context you're joining, the culture you're joining, the boss you're joining to work for, as opposed to necessarily joining for a specific role. And that's sort of been my approach really since then, I guess. And then the Two Circles journey you mentioned, so leading the line there involved hiring the best part of 250 people in about 4.5, 5 years. So learned a lot about what to do and what not to do in that journey. Met a lot of people, had a lot of philosophical conversations myself about how long is the minimum if you know an interview's not going anywhere, all that good stuff. Kind of learned a bunch the hard way.
What did you what did you decide on, or is that still undecided?
I've had 2 or 3 friends who are also CEOs of organisations at the time, and we sat around just before Christmas and debated that, and we came up with about 25 minutes on the basis if it's not going to work, somebody's been given of their time, spend time with you, and your responsibility then was offer some fluid feedback in the moment and a bit of career coaching if you can.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've weirdly been on the flip side of that, where I've gone halfway through an interview, I just don't think I'm going to be good at this job. And that takes, I don't say it's necessarily confidence, potentially more stupidity than confidence. But look, Matt, you and I kind of started in a very similar position in the sense that we both started management consultancy and tried to move into the sports bubble, as it were. And it took me, at the time, 18 months to get into it and get into a very similar role. And again, it was the boss rather than necessarily the role, bearing in mind they'd been ex-Accenture themselves as well. You mentioned around that's the approach that you took, but when you started that in terms of going out, kind of looking outside the sports bubble, was that a bit of an anomaly in the sports industry? How did you really grow that approach?
You mean from a Two Circles perspective, looking outside people outside the
I think your approach just from that experience as well.
Yeah, so I guess hopefully what I managed to do in terms of a way of finding myself into the industry was make my own luck a little bit. So I worked for a generalist strategy consultancy and spent a bunch of time knowing more than it was healthy for any 26-year-old to know about pallet racking in France and Spain. And then just used to leave books out on my desk that talked about the business of sport or changes in media and entertainment landscape, and for no reason other than just trying to show the space I was interested in. So then when a project came in for Disney, as luck would have it, I was rolling off a project at the time. And so I was thought of as somebody that might know a little bit already about that space. Ended up on there, moved from there, knew a little bit about entertainment, and then left the sports business books on my desk more deliberately. And a project in the periphery of the sports industry came in. And so on the back of making my luck there, it was then easier to make the jump across into being full-time at the NBA as was then. And that really just because of sort of saying, okay, well, if that's where my heart lies, this isn't going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen with a speculative CV to a sports organisation who aren't going to know what to make of me. I'm going to need to make my own luck. And I guess as a result of that, through the Two Circles journey, I think through our first 100 people we hired in the organisation, only 8 had worked in sport before. And that was really because as we were trying to do something different to the way the agency world had traditionally worked. And so if that was the case, why would we hire people who'd been doing things in a very traditional way? And so hopefully what I was able to do then was, in the way in which I interviewed, the way in which we found people, was look for a background that suggested they were the kind of people that might leave books on their desk, that might show that intrinsic flame that would suggest that they might be keen to make the jump across.
And just sort of kind of building off the back of that, it's very interesting to hear that you've actually hired a lot of people outside of sport, and obviously what Two Circles has done to the sport industry is sort of really innovated it into a forward-thinking sector, if you will. What's most important for you as someone who's hiring? Is it the skill sets that they can bring and expertise they can bring? Is it the cultural fit? Is it a combination of both? What do you look for first and foremost when you are hiring candidates?
So I guess back in the day, Two Circles was, and it's evolved a lot under Gareth's leadership since I stepped back, but Two Circles really a blend of strategy consultancy, so market type intelligence, data integration, data analytics, so understanding the data environment in an organization and building market strategies out from that, putting those two skill sets together with sort of digital marketing in its broadest sense. So Two Circles was a blend of those 3 businesses put together as an amalgam into one. And therefore, it wasn't that difficult to find people who had expertise in one of the 3 as a minimum. But what was difficult was to find people who might have learnt their trade, no offence, Dan, at Accenture or Procter & Gamble or anywhere else for that matter, and had the softer skill sets which would make a difference in sports. So not just the analytic rigor, but the emotion intelligence to be able to work with the chief exec of a Premiership rugby team and help them understand why and how half of their marketing budget had been wasted, or to work with a group of people busy under pressure across the sports organisation and Two Circles itself, and sort of lead with a small L, as opposed to step into that space of making things happen. And those were things that actually were what separated the good or the okay from the exceptional, even at the Two Circles talent pool, was to be able to blend the right and the left brain fundamentally.
It's really interesting because you kind of mentioned there around a lot of it has based around the values. And we know both from what you've said and what Gareth said previously that Two Circles was very much based on values and a very, very clear vision from the very beginning. And you've mentioned that in terms of how that impacted your approach to hiring at the beginning, those first kind of 100 people, as you say. Did that change as you continued to grow? Or was that still very much at the heart of that recruitment process, obviously up until you kind of took a step back?
My sense is that to this day, the values piece at Two Circles is absolutely fundamental. There's a really important distinction between values and cultural fit. So in the early days, you had, frankly, 8 sweaty men and a really unfortunate but excellent lady called Kerry in a very small room trying to make 800 things happen at one time. And in that environment, cultural fit actually was relatively important. But the challenge with cultural fit is that means you can just be, as you grow, just be one homogenous mix of exactly the same types of people, and that's really dangerous, especially if you as an organization are looking to reflect the various divergent audiences you're looking to understand and serve on behalf of rights holders. So I'd say that the focus on cultural fit moved quickly, and we were less focused about that very, very early on. But the values piece remains consistent. Either you're looking to bring in somebody that you want to spend time with and enjoy time with, and when you get under pressure, is going to react in the same way as you on behalf of the team, or you don't.
And you mentioned there around the cultural fit being a kind of similar type of person. From a diversity perspective, did you find that easier that you were getting more diverse people because you were looking outside of the sports industry, or was it still similar type of people at least applying for the roles when you were going out for it?
It's a really good question, and that you draw the distinction there between being proactive and reactive. Candidly, we probably weren't as proactive as we should have been early on because our name was getting out there, and we were busy as you like, day in and day out. We were very proactive, I'd like to think, in the way in which once somebody had made an application, we looked to make sure we were asking the right questions, managing CVs in the right way, blind screening, all the kind of hygiene factor type stuff you would think of it today, to enable us to get as diverse an audience working in the business as possible. I'm not sure we were necessarily that proactive in where we look for people in terms of looking for a diversity piece. Often we were proactive just in terms of trying to find capable people with the eye to land in the organisation. Latterly, Gareth's done a phenomenal job with the team in terms of being more proactive in the places they look to find people, to make sure that the employee base is far more representative of global culture it looks to serve.
Sort of kind of going back into what Gareth is doing now, technology has obviously played a huge part in improving the recruitment process. Did you guys ever use recruitment consultants when you were at Two Circles, or was it all done manually in-house with the team that you guys had?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We use recruitment agencies, in particular those who had a cadre of talent from outside sport. So those who focused on areas outside the sports industry. We also use platforms to find as wide a talent pool as possible, because it's not everyone who had the relationships to get on a database of a London-based recruitment agency. And so we used a blend of sort of technology platforms and recruitment agencies as well. And both, frankly, were hugely helpful. Also used my network, Gareth's network, other networks to sort of get word out, in particular when we were looking for quite specialist groups of skills. And so I think we probably did a fairly decent job. I mean, you have to look everywhere, frankly, when you're looking to hire one person a week, which is basically what it boiled down to. One person a week is probably 3 second-round interviews a week, which means the best part of, for us, probably 10 first-round interviews a week, which probably means screening 100 CVs. So you have to look everywhere if you're looking to to deliver on those kind of maths.
And how involved were you within that system? Were you screening the CVs yourself? Obviously, at the very beginning, I get that's part of it, and I assume that then drops off a little bit as you grow. But did you then take an active part because it's an enjoyable thing? How did you then approach it as you continued to grow?
So for the first 5 years, certainly well into our time with WPP, I did the first round interview for pretty much everyone in the organisation. Sometimes Gareth would, and I would flip. So Gareth would do the first and I'd do the second. Fundamentally, you had the chief exec and the MD doing them all. And, we're a tech-enabled professional service business at the time. And so if you're not prepared to spend the, day and a half a week, day a week, on that, what on earth are you spending time on if your product and the success of your business completely hinges on the quality of your people? Why would that not be your number one priority every week? Don't get me wrong. There's days where you have 5 first round interviews and then 2 seconds stacked up in the diary, and you get a slight sinking feeling sometimes, but it's business critical. Just as business critical as the client pitches we were doing around that and things as well, because ultimately a business is a blend of demand and supply. And it amazes me still how many agency holders or rights holders spend the whole time on demand and no time on supply. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to understand how that first round interviewee, when he or she rocked in and the CEO was sat there opposite, how that made them feel, how they reacted to that. Was that part of it in the sense that they knew that you were doing the first, or you or Gareth were going to be doing the first and second round interviews, or was it a bit more of a kind of turn up and shit the CEOs in the office?
Well, look, I mean, ultimately, I saw the responsibilities being quite end to end. So, the person who would have set the meeting up would have been me as well. And so they'd have known that was the case. So we saw it as, based on what I mentioned earlier on, it was a lot harder to find people who had the soft skills and the values set for our business than it was the specific technical skills. And so we did the value screening first on the basis there's no point putting 10 people through a technical capability assessment and then to look at their values fit. So I did the values one typically first. And ultimately that comes down to your skill as an interviewer to put people at ease, be open to being asked questions as well as ask them, and help people feel like they were getting a rewarding experience no matter how the conversation panned out. And so if I was hopefully good at one thing, it would have been that. But also you have to keep in mind, we're a 25, 35, 45, whatever it was, up to a couple of hundred size organization looking to pull people from Procter & Gamble and Accenture and digital marketing agencies and straight out of great academics or doing a really good work experience set. In order to do that, we were as much selling our organization to them as they were selling their skill set to us. And so to know that the chief exec and the MD was taking time in the interview process, was comfortable being asked questions about P&Ls and balance sheets and things like that. And we were.
And
it's fundamental, I think.
And what made
being able to recruit
the candidates get through to first interview stand out? A CV and a cover letter is one thing, but did they go above and beyond and provide results, video? What narrowed those 100 CVs you got per job or more down to the 10 that you wanted to progress with the first round interviews?
We looked at the initial CV process. Granted, there's a little bit of variance to this in terms of the level we were recruiting for, but we were looking for four things ultimately. We were looking for evidence of analytics, but by analytics, I mean just being able to have something in your background, that suggests you can look for patterns, right, and find the interesting things amongst the interesting needle in the haystack of information that exists in a digital world. And that might is just as likely to come from a geography degree as an engineering degree as from a year spent in an analytics organisation, part of a charity. I can come from all sorts of places, but we're looking to see some kind of analytics background. We were looking to see, like, the academics piece was important to us, but if academics weren't there, but there was a good reason why, somebody was neurodivergent, somebody had played an elite level of performance sport, we had a couple of people who'd been at Royal Ballet School, so something else that they've been doing in their life that meant they weren't able to spend the time or focus purely on academics. That was important. The third thing was an intuitive interest and understanding of the business of sport, which we framed as we wanted to see evidence of that, and that we could glean that from a CV somehow. So do I think this is the kind of person that gets home knackered on a Monday night after a hard day at work, sits down in front of the telly, happens to be some football on, and just looks at the coloured dots wandering around on a green pitch? Or are they the kind of person that can't help but to say, why is that advertising hoarding in Chinese? Or why is that stand full and that one empty? Or why is there a logo on the sleeve for the first time as well as on the front of the shirt? Some of us are just wired to be interested in some of that stuff. Some of us are wired to glaze over when people start talking about it. We were looking for the former. And the final one was emotional intelligence. So could we see things in somebody's background CV or covering letter that gave us a sense of that they might be able to lead with a small L, right? So could they listen rather than talk? Had they stood in front of a load of mates at school or uni in the pouring rain on a February night and looked to persuade them that it was worth trying to come back from 2-0 down? Like that sort of piece of the jigsaw, whether it was fifth 11 or first 11 or whatever was irrelevant. It's just, had they been in that situation? And really what we were looking to do in that values interview was, I guess, just get under the last of those two. So understand a little bit more about how they've been in situations or been through environments where they brought that leadership with a small L to bear, and also just get a sense of that real intrinsic interest in the business of sport. And that's the EI one's really interesting because you don't necessarily, I didn't feel like you learned about that by asking questions. I felt like what I did a lot of was try and find ways that they would reveal that to me. So little things like I just would take a chunk of time just to be quiet in the conversation and see if they ask me questions. I deliberately play around with my body language in the conversation. So, back and relaxed and almost looking slightly disengaged, and see if they move their body forward to engage with me again, try and bring me back into the conversation. Body language, you could almost, I'm sure many people have written very long documents, frankly, without.
Is that something that you researched to ensure you got the best candidate, or was that something that you learned along the way of just almost toying what works, what doesn't work?
I think it's pretty innate, to be honest. I think it is, being in that situation myself of giving a team talk 2-0 down in a wet February night and being able to spot the right back who's had enough and wants to come off, and the centre midfielder who's still up for it and wants to give you another 10%. The way in which you engage with a group like that is exactly the same skill set that becomes innate, and you therefore end up, in interview situations or corporate situations or whatever. So I'm not sure it's as deliberate as I'd love it here.
Start at home first.
I'm a Chelsea fan, so that would need to be a very good deal. Yeah.
Exactly.
What's the phrase? He in glass houses throws first stone or something.
Not dissimilar, but related to a lot of that. You now mentor and work with a lot of CEOs from different businesses, not just in sport as well. What have you observed from their approaches to recruitment? And have there been major differences between the industries they're in and sport, or is the challenges and the approaches relatively similar?
That's a fantastic question. I think if I'm being really candid, so I'm 40, depends when this comes out. I'm somewhere between 48 and 49, somewhere between 48 and 49. And I suspect that CEOs who are sort of 10 years younger than me and below probably are far more adept at creating a mutually beneficial, engaging, learning-based recruitment experience, as opposed to those older than I am and my age, who grew up in the era of recruitment being extremely transactional, very process-heavy, very formal, very one-way. So it's interesting that some of the younger CEOs I work with intuitively understand that newer generations come into the workforce, or highly prized senior leaders looking to make that next jump, need as much listening and talking, need as much. It's a two-way sales conversation as opposed to a one-way. It's there's a great phrase, why would anyone want to be led by you? And I think there's a lot of senior leaders that I work with who often need a bit of a reality check in terms of understanding that nobody earns a divine right to have a cracking portfolio of potential candidates anymore. And you have to earn that right rather than it happen just because you happen to have a football club that's in the top 5 of the Premier League. So I think there's a lot of generational learning in there. What I notice, that's particularly true of sports. What I notice in sitting on the nominations and remuneration committee for a public sector board at the moment, what I notice is the HR director in that environment and the other INED who comes from a corporate environment have learned so much more quickly than sport has in terms of creating opportunities to find a diverse workforce, or understanding the two-way nature of recruitment, or what makes a really robust and well-governed recruitment process. So I think there's a load of good experience that we should all be leaning on in the sports industry outside of our little bubble.
Matt, you've been absolutely fantastic, and it's been super interesting listening to you. I know, Dan, I've certainly learned a lot from an industry expert. There are, however, 3 quickfire questions we ask everyone at the end. You don't have to mention any names, but we'll start with question number 1, which is most frustrating thing about recruitment.
Most frustrating thing traditionally has been its process orientation. It was one of many areas of HR back in the day, which were just process heavy, pen pushing. The most exciting thing about recruitment is seeing the industry pivot and change so quickly, which ultimately, if you take a load of the use technologies, takes a load of the process and the faffing around out, you actually spend more time on people, which is
and I love the fact
why
that
it's an interesting and exciting
even
place
as
to
a
work.
founder, CEO, etc., you still played a pivotal part in the recruitment process. You've obviously hired a huge amount of people. Who is your best hire and why?
So my best hire is my wife. So there were 3 of us set. The 3 of us set 2 circles up. Gareth, CEO to this day, myself, and my wife Claire. Claire, when we were looking to set the business up, had just sold through her portfolio in venture capital. We had 2 kids. She wasn't desperately keen to go back to the world of deal doing. And so our recruitment process involved a couple of bottles of wine and persuading her that it might be a nice idea to be FD at 2 circles. And the learning out of that is not just on a selfish level. It made the journey in 2 circles both more rewarding, but also much less pressured for me because it was a family venture as opposed to I was the one solo who'd put our mortgage on the line and so on, despite having 2 young kids. But if there's a more applicable learning out of that ramble for you and everyone listening, it's Claire's background. Sure, it was finance and she had her SEMA qualification things, but her venture capital background made her just the most amazing sort of angel on Gareth and my shoulders in terms of there wasn't a problem we encountered with the model of the business in the first 3 years she hadn't seen before, and had learned sometimes the hard way, but mostly learned successfully what the best thing to do was in that environment. And so the learning for that is not hiring specifically for the skills that you're looking for on that day. You know, we could have found somebody who'd been a startup FD who, unlike Claire, knew how to kind of build the spreadsheets and do all the basic transactional stuff. But we hired somebody who would be the kind of angel on our shoulder for the next 3-4 years. And so, and indeed 8 years after she'd sold the business twice along its journey. So yeah,
I have to say, no disrespect to the previous we've had, but that is by far the best one we've heard. And then last but not least, one thing you would change about the recruitment world.
I think I would change the mindset with which people think about recruitment. So I know it's easy to say with a business at 2 circles that was cash generative enough that we could, or looked to, frankly, hire people before we had a piece of work for them to do if we found the right people. But it feels to me like recruitment as it's become less process heavy, is all about who are the people we need to do today's job, not what is our business strategy for the next 3 years, what are the key skills we're going to need to underpin that, and how do we put ourselves in the best position to build a pathway across that time period when we come across the right people. So I guess it would just be to stop looking kind of at our shoes or backwards and start thinking about slightly more proactively about the talent we need in our organisation.
Well, Matt, that's me forward. Done. I mean, you have been fantastic. I can't thank you for your time. Huge amount learned.
That's right. Thanks for having me.